Good day. Welcome to the channel of SA Accounting Network. In today's talk, I want to talk to you guys about PAIA Manuals and everything that you need to know as a small business owner regarding PAIA Manuals.
PAIA Manual properly. It's not a very difficult thing to comply with. It's just very important that you get it done. A lot of clients hear that there's this manual that needs to be prepared. They know that it's got something to do with POPI, and they think once they've prepared it and submitted it, they are now POPI compliant. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We've tried to keep the costs down, but what I will say is a template is not going to work. Your PAIA manual needs to speak to you as a butcher as much as it needs to speak to another client as a hospital.
I always have the saying with my clients that I see myself as a GP when it comes to accounting related matters. So I know a little bit about everything, but I don't specialize in any specific area. So if you had to go to a doctor and he sees something funny in your skin and not sure what it is, then he's obviously going to refer you to a specialist. So the same thing applies to the PAIA manuals. I know that there's something that's got to happen regarding PAIA manuals, so I decided to bring in one of the big guns. We're going to be talking to a lawyer today, Matthew De Wett, and we're going to be answering a lot of questions regarding the PAIA manuals. So I'm going to jump onto my computer, onto a Zoom call, and then we're going to take it from there. Good morning, Matthew. How are you doing today?
Well, thanks, Heinrich. Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining on the video today. I'm really excited to have you here. And as I just did the introduction quickly, we're just going to be talking about everything related to PAIA manuals. So maybe just as an intro, do you just want to give yourself a little bit of background of who you are, where you're from, why are you involved with the PAIA manuals?
Sure. So I actually started off my career similar to you in the accounting field, although I didn't do an accounting undergrad. I did a law degree, I did a BCom as well, and I ended up in an auditing firm in the tax department. And I really enjoyed spending some time in the tax department looking at some financials, and I enjoyed the commercial side of things, did a lot of corporate tax. And from there, I just had a desire to go back or go into the legal profession. But I took a lot of what I learned with me from the audit firm, and I really enjoyed the commercial side of things. So I ended up just doing commercial law and being a commercial lawyer for since 2012, actually. And we've got a small practice that focuses on commercial matters, commercial transactions, drafting contracts, and deal making and mergers, acquisitions. And we really love what we do. And where we've really had a particular focus is smaller businesses. We really enjoy working with SMEs because for a lot of them, compliance seems so difficult. It seems so expensive, and they get themselves into trouble because they often think that calling a lawyer is going to cost a fortune. And, while, some things, aren't cheap, really good advice doesn't need to be exceptionally expensive. And we've really enjoyed working alongside smaller guys to make the law easy, understandable, but really to protect them as they go into business and they're transacting with others, to keep them out of harm's way and to make mistakes that we could just pick up quite easily. So we work alongside SMEs very closely, and we say, look, treat us as part of your business, not as the lawyer that you're scared to pick up the phone because you're going to get a 500 Rand bill for.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that intro. Yeah, so let's quickly jump into the stuff about PAIA. Like I said, there's been a lot of talk on the news lately about PAIA manuals and PAIA deadlines that's on its way. And I think that is obviously the purpose of the talk, just to get behind it and just for the people out there, just to understand what this whole commotion is about. So what is a PAIA manual?
It's a good question. A lot of people have heard about this PAIA manual, and the truth is that it's been out there circulating for a very long time. The Promotion of Access to Information Act was promulgated in 2000, and it's been around for a long time. The requirement to prepare and submit a PAIA manual has been around since the early 2000s. The reason why a lot of SMEs haven't had to take note yet is because they've had a blanket exemption for a very long time. But let's get back to the question. The PAIA manual is basically a manual in terms of Section 51 of the Promotion of Access to Information Act that must be prepared by a private body and submitted to the relevant body, which is at the moment the Human Rights Commission. And in there, Section 51 stipulates what needs to go inside that manual. So, for example, you need to put in the details of the private body, and that is the business that's completing the manual. They need to list who the head of the private body is, and it actually just helps you understand who it is. If it's a company, it's the managing director or A partnership would be the managing partner, or a sole prop would be the sole prop himself. You need to describe all the records that you hold. You need to describe how to access those records. You need to give information about the people who you collect information about, just the categories, a description of the information you collect, and what security measures you've taken to protect that information. Now, this all sounds very arbitrary, but I think it's important to understand why this is required. So, as you know, PAIA, which is the promotion of access to information, and POPI, something we'll talk about a little bit later, protection of personal information. Those two pieces of legislation really deal with data protection and access to data. And we'll talk more about the distinction between the two later, because there is quite a big distinction. But in this act, we're really talking about protecting the right to access to information, okay? And in order for someone to access your information, okay, you need to disclose what kind of information you keep, and and how do they come to request information from you. And that is effectively what the Act seeks to do. The information that you need to put into this manual is all set out in Section 51. It's a laundry list of things you need to put in. Of course, the devil's in the details. It's always very difficult to understand what exactly do I need to put in there. Do I need to, disclose everything that I'm doing? It's not that onerous. It's really just broad categories, which we'll talk about a little bit later.
Awesome. Thanks, Matthew. I think that's a very good basis to start from, just to understand the whole thing about the PAIA Act. And I read just now that while we were talking about entities, I think you were referring to private bodies. Why do they call it a private body? Why don't they just call it a company or entity? Or?
Sure. So what they've done is they've made the PAIA Act applicable to public bodies and to private bodies. And they've made all private bodies and public bodies, they are obliged to prepare and submit this PAIA manual. So a private body, in terms of the Act, is defined as either a natural person or a partnership who carries on any trade, business, or profession, and any juristic person. So if you are carrying on a business for your own account, whether you are a sole prop or a partnership, you are a private body as defined in the Act. And if you are a juristic person, company, trust, close corporation, or other co-op or whatever, which is incorporated, or then you are definitely also defined and caught inside that definition of private body. And a public body would be more sort of government type entities, etc. Public. So private body would also include a public company. So this piece of legislation applies to private bodies and public bodies equally, but we are going to just focus on private bodies for the purposes, I think, of this discussion.
So just in terms of private bodies, obviously you were talking about sole proprietors, companies, close corporations, all those type of entities. So what about the normal guy on the street? If we look at like plumbers and electricians and driving instructors and stuff, do they need to comply with this legislation as well?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. So, if you think about it, if you can squeeze them into the definition of trade, business, or profession, even your guy that's selling fruit on the side of the road technically meets that definition. Now, of course, we're not sure how the information regulator is going to check up on these things, because, what we'll talk about later is what you need to do with this manual once you've created it. And what you need to do with it is submit it to the Human Rights Commission, put it on your website, and keep it available at your premises. Now, your fruit seller typically doesn't have a website, a premises really, other than maybe a stand, which you could consider their premises. So it really goes to, we're not sure how the information regulator is going to look at this and treat the really small guys. But, all I can advise is that technically, in terms of the definition, if you are carrying on a business, trade, or profession for your own account or in a partnership, you are definitely going to fall into the definition of private body, and you are going to be liable to or obligated to prepare and submit a PAIA manual. And then the same goes for any juristic person. There's no requirement for carrying on a business, but any juristic person must then, it does fall within the definition of private body.
What is the deadline for the PAIA manuals?
Right. So this is why I started the conversation to say that, you know, people have heard about this for a very long time. Since the early 2000s, this PAIA manual's been around. There was a push and a drive early on to get some clients to submit their PAIA manuals. But the reason why most of your clients wouldn't have heard about it is because right from the outset, the minister issued by a government notice an exemption. And that exemption was for your smaller companies, and I'm going to come back to what a smaller company is. Your smaller companies, your sole props, and your partnerships, your trusts, they were all exempted, and they were given blanket exemptions, I think about 5 years at a time. Every single, at the end of every single exemption period, another exemption was issued. It was only the public bodies, the public companies, and the bigger private companies that exceeded certain employee and turnover thresholds that had to submit manuals immediately. So there really wasn't a lot of, you know, percentage-wise, there wasn't a lot of businesses required to then comply and submit their manuals. And what has changed is, of course, everyone's been hearing a lot about POPI. And POPI, just to remind the viewers, is the Protection of Personal Information Act. And that was promulgated a few years ago, but we all have heard in the media that from 1 July this year, the information regulator is going to start enforcing it. It is in force at the moment, but they're already going to start strictly enforcing it from the 1st of July. The PAIA Act amended Section 51 of PAIA, and in just plain terms, they amended what needed to go in your PAIA manual. So a lot of the stuff that's in your PAIA manual now is POPI related stuff, i.e. it relates to the treatment and collection and processing of personal information. With that coming in, okay, it now made sense to bring an end to this long-standing exemption for the small businesses, because as part of your POPI compliance, a PAIA manual is quite important. So they now on the 18th of December last year, the minister then finally ended the long-standing exemption, and they've given all private bodies, sole proprietors, partnerships, smaller companies that had previously been exempted, trusts, etc., until the 30th of June this year to prepare their PAIA manual. So for the first time, SMEs have had to take notes about this PAIA manual properly. It's not a very difficult thing to comply with. It's just very important that you get it done, because there are consequences, which we might talk about a little bit later.
Thanks, Matthew. I think one thing that you mentioned now was that the PAIA manual and the way that it interacts with the POPI Act. And so I think there's a lot of confusion about that as well, because I think a lot of people are under the impression that if you compile your PAIA manual, then that's it. Then you don't need to do anything else to be compliant with the POPI Act. Do you maybe just want to just explain a little bit about that as well? You know, that I think, yeah, just how the two things fit in with each other?
Absolutely, absolutely. You are entirely right. I think a lot of clients hear that there's this manual that needs to be prepared. They know that it's got something to do with POPI, and they think once they've prepared it and submitted it, they are now POPI compliant. Unfortunately, that's not the case. Section 51 of PAIA is the instructing section for your PAIA manual, and it's not part of the POPI Act. While your PAIA manual has a POPI flavor, meaning that there's a lot of things that must go in your manual which actually do kind of stem from the POPI Act. It's not a replacement for POPI compliance. POPI compliance is really about looking at your business, preparing what they call the personal information impact assessment, where you look at your entire business and see where you're falling short of all the provisions of POPI, and then putting policies in place to make sure that you are protecting the information that you are collecting. So just to recap, PAIA is all about what records do I keep, who do I collect information about, and it facilitates applications by outsiders to request information from you, okay? POPI is all about the information that I collect from people. How do I protect that? What am I allowed to do with it? Do I have all the security protocols in place to make sure that it is protected? Am I allowed to send that information to service providers without thinking? Should there be policies in place? How do I safeguard that information? Am I allowed to use Dropbox, for instance? Is that safe enough? So there are really different things. And we work very closely with a POPI compliance specialist, and we go in together and we do the PAIA manuals, and they take care of the POPI compliance. And what I've understood from how they do it is they really go in and do an impact assessment on your business, and then help you get your privacy policies, your security policies in place, register your information officer, which is required in terms of the Act, and just implement everything and make sure that you're sending out the right consents where you need to, or you're making the right third-party declarations, and you handling data breaches correctly, etc. So the Acts really do deal with different things. And perhaps because we are focusing on PAIA, perhaps I could just quickly go through the purpose of the PAIA Act just to understand it again. And so in terms of Section 32 of the Constitution, everyone has the right to access to information. That's a basic right. But also in terms of the Constitution, everyone's got the right to privacy. So if you can see, if someone wants to request information from you, some information that you hold, and they're going to rely on the right to access information in the Constitution, you are similarly going to rely on the right to privacy, your own privacy and the privacy of your clients and the information you hold. So those two compete. So what the Act tried to do is they tried to perform a balancing act, and this is the PAIA Act, not the POPI Act. It tried to perform a balancing act between when can someone actually approach you and ask for information, how must they do that, is there an application form, etc. What are the grounds that they need to request that information, what can they request, what grounds for refusal do you have, and if you've denied someone a request for access to information, is there a process for appeal? And it does deal with all of those things, and your PAIA manual largely deals with all of that. We list all the categories of records and information we hold. We set out in there the process for you asking me for information. There's an application form that's standard that we attach to the manual. We set out the tariff fees that are applicable if someone wants to ask for information. We set out some of the grounds that you can deny that request for information. And that's all done to facilitate an outsider requesting information from you to properly balance those rights against each other.
Yeah, that sounds good. So just another question. I think that you were talking about public having access to information. What about confidential information? Will they be able to access your confidential information about your clients and stuff like that?
Exactly right. So they actually won't be, and that's what we'll do in terms of the PAIA Act and the manual. We will have that process where we can have an opportunity to consider whether the basis for your request and whether it's a lawful request or not, and we can deny it on the basis of our client's information being private. Now, of course, there's things like subpoenas which now go outside of the system. So someone can't just walk in and ask for your private information. There is information that they can ask for, and if there's a good reason and they needed to protect their own rights, then you will judge each case on its merits, and you have the right to refuse, and they have got the right to appeal, and then it goes and it gets heard by a third party. So there's not this blanket. It's not giving a blanket right to people to just come and ask for your information. It's all about facilitating. How do we do it? What's the right way to do it? We're going to fill out this form, give it to your information officer, who's then going to look at it and consider it and give their reasons for denying or not on a case-by-case basis, and then where to from there if you deny it. So it really just sets out the process of requesting information and there will be many times where they're requesting either information about themselves, or it is information that you can release, or it is a purpose which is permissible under the Act. But each one of those will be judged on its merits. And the PAIA manual really just sets out all the things, all the information that is required to be set out in terms of Section 51, which guides you. And it really just makes you set out what information do I keep, what kind of categories of records do I keep, so that someone does know what you're keeping, what they can request, and how to do so.
Good. Just another question quickly is, we were talking about the PAIA manuals, and obviously we need to compile the PAIA manuals, and you guys will get involved with the compilation of those manuals. But what must we do with the manual once we have it? Is it just something that I just put into my top drawer and just forget about it? Or is it actually a working paper? Must I display it somewhere?
Good question. Good question. So once you've prepared your PAIA manual, you then need to submit it to the Human Rights Commission, which we will then do for you if you wish. From the 1st of July, we understand that the information regulator, which is a newly appointed body, will take over that function. But for now, we're still submitting them to the Human Rights Commission, who file them and keep them on record. I'm not sure what else they do with them. You also need to make it available on your website. If you have a website, the Act is clear on it. If you don't have a website, you don't need to create a website just to put it on. It must be kept at your business premises, and it must be made available to anyone on reasonable request. So if they reach out to you by email, you must make it available. So it is a public document. Effectively, it is being published for everyone to see. You know, we haven't personally seen too many requests for information. So, I mean, I'm not sure. We don't anticipate suddenly now the floodgates are going to open, because someone could always request information from you. It's only now that you actually have to comply and prepare the manual itself, which assists someone understand how to go about requesting information from you. But, you know, it's always been the case that you have been, since the early 2000s, someone can request information from you. It's not now that the Act is suddenly applicable to private bodies. It's always been. It's just now that they have got to submit their manuals. So we don't anticipate the floodgates opening and suddenly people taking the chance to request information from you. They've always had the right to do so. So once you've made it available in all of those places, then, you know, you have complied with Section 51. Can I just go into a little bit? We've actually called it something different. Can I just quickly explain?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, we've called it an information manual, which I suppose hasn't helped with the general confusion that people think that this is a PAIA document. We've called it an information manual for one reason. Section 18 of PAIA requires you to make a certain list of disclosures about what you do with information that you're going to collect, etc., before you collect information from someone. So if you're approaching me as a new client and I ask you for your ID number, I've got to disclose to you why I need that information, who's going to be the recipient of that information, and what am I going to do with it, and why do I need it in the first place. So it creates a bit of a problem where you're having to do that with every time someone sends you information, and it might trip you up and just cause an unnecessary business disruption. So what we've done is we've included in our PAIA manuals, so-called PAIA manual, Section 18 categories of disclosure that you need to make. So when we complete the manual for you, we'll ask you some of those questions and we'll put those in your manual, so that when your client comes to you and wants to give you information, we suggest that in your email footer, you just say, in compliance with Section 18 of PAIA, we are required to make certain disclosures to you before you submit your personal information to us, and you refer them to the information manual that sits on their website. The client can then read that, and effectively you've then disclosed that to them before they've disclosed any personal information to you. So we've just changed the name to call it an information manual, because we have brought in certain PAIA elements into the manual which go towards your PAIA compliance, although we are not saying that this doesn't go towards ensuring your entire PAIA compliance. We've taken one component which we thought would be helpful and put it into the PAIA manual, and we've just called it an information manual because it does deal with PAIA related things and PAIA related things in it as well.
That's good. So the big question, what would happen if we miss the deadline?
Well, you know, this is not the great part of things, because you know, we never want to throw, you know, the negative consequences in, but of course we do need to bring it to people's attention. In terms of the PAIA Act, there's a specific section which deals specifically about not submitting your PAIA manuals fraudulently or negligently on time, and they do actually reserve the right to levy penalties, fines, and it can go as severe as on conviction imprisonment, not exceeding 2 years. Now, the head of the private body is going to be responsible for this, and so everyone now needs to just listen, because if you're the head of the private body, it is actually on your shoulders to make sure that this PAIA manual goes in time, because it is you that will be held and convicted and found guilty and punished in the way set out in the Act. The head, we will assist with who the head is, but just briefly, like I said earlier, In terms of a sole prop, the head would be the sole proprietor. In terms of a partnership, it would be one of the partners which is designated so. In terms of a private company, it would be the CEO, et cetera, et cetera. So there's an automatic head, even if you don't appoint a head, there's an automatic head. So someone is going to be on the line to make sure that this gets done. The good news is it's very easy to comply. And we're not sure about the information regulators' capacity come 1st of July to start policing this. We don't know if they're going to audit websites. We don't know if they're going to do random inspections. We're not sure how they're going to handle it. I think, it's just our duty to say, look, we have until the 30th of June to get it done. It's not a difficult piece of compliance at all. It's not a very expensive piece of compliance at all. Just get it done, and at least you can rest assured that that is done and you've ticked that box.
That's good. These manuals, must they be updated, or once I do it now, is it going to be valid for the next 20 years, or is it something that changes over time?
It's really something that you have to watch for if there's changes in your own organizational business. If you are adding categories of information that you collect, or you're increasing your divisions, or you're venturing into sort of new areas, and you're now, that some of the answers that you've answered and some of the things in your manual are now outdated, or there's new things that should come in, or then, we do suggest that you update your manual. It's very painless. We can assist, and you just submit the new manual and you upload the new manual on your website. So you should keep it up to date. It should be reflective of your current business. But, it's quite vast, and it's quite general in many areas. So, there shouldn't be too many changes unless you really are restructuring, and you have now brought in new divisions and you're doing brand new things. It should last you quite a long time. It's not something that changes weekly unless there's major changes within your business.
Yes. And I made a note, another question that I wanted to ask, but I think we did discuss it briefly, is the distinction or the link between the PAIA Act and PAIA. I think we did discuss it briefly, but maybe if you just want to just expand a little bit on that again.
I really think that you can't expand it too many times, because it is confusing. Yeah, the PAIA Act, and just its name gives it away, is the PAIA Act deals with how to facilitate access to information. So it's the promotion of access to information, and that is just, how does someone on the outside of your organization get hold of a record that you hold, and how do we facilitate that process? And my manual is going to tell you how do I do it, and it's going to give you details of what form you need to fill in and the costs, what records I hold, so that you know what to ask for, etc. if you need to. And that really protects the right of access to information, which is enshrined in the Constitution, and balances with the right to the privacy, which is also in the Constitution. The PAIA Act, promotion of the protection of personal information, that is all about, what am I doing with the information that I collect? Am I keeping it as secure as it needs to be? Am I dealing with it in ways that I'm allowed to? For example, I'm not allowed to give it to unauthorized people, etc. Am I really, are my security policies up to date? And am I doing all I can to make sure that when someone gives me personal information, it's not going to escape, leave my firm in an unauthorized manner? It's going to be protected, kept safe for the amount of time I'm allowed to keep it for, etc. So the one's all about protecting information. The other one's about facilitating access to information, and they are quite distinct. And the only reason why there's an overlap is because the PAIA Act changed some of the things that must go in your PAIA manual, certain disclosures, just so that people are aware of the categories of information that you collect about other people to facilitate a request, but not in the context of keeping it safe. That's more that's more the PAIA Act.
Awesome. Yeah, that explains it definitely. And then just, I think one of the last questions is, obviously we've got the deadline coming up. What do we do to get compliant? How do we go about doing these PAIA manuals? Is it something that I can do myself? Do I really need to get somebody from the outside to assist me with this? Can't I just use a template and just put in my name and just submit that through? And what is your opinion?
That is a very good question. And, I am also a small business owner, so, it's very understandable that businesses see this as another step of compliance, which is going to cost money. So we've tried to keep the costs down, but what I will say is a template is not going to work. your PAIA manual needs to speak to you as a butcher as much as it needs to speak to another client as a hospital. There is no one size fits all. It really is bespoke as to what information you are collecting, what categories of records you keep, and it's very bespoke to you. There is really not a template that you could just kind of fill in and hope to get by on. We've tried to keep the cost down to try and promote clients from just rather coming to us and getting a proper manual done that's going to be accepted by the Human Rights Commission, and it's going to tick all your boxes in Section 51 of the PAIA Act, so that you don't have to worry about looking over your shoulder if you haven't complied and the information regulator sniffing around and coming to see what you've done. So, you know, we do encourage SMEs to approach us and get their manual done through us. We really are here to help. From the PAIA side, we assist. I think you are going to, on your website, have a catchment form that they can complete, and it will come straight to us. And then we will take it from there. We will contact the client, be in discussions, and take them through the process of getting their manuals prepared and submitted. And then we will also, well, I'm sure that you'll have another video with another PAIA expert that you can introduce them to from the PAIA side. It's important that they get hold of a PAIA expert as well, you know, to look at their business and just do a quick look through an assessment of their current policies, and just advise them if they need to update anything, just so that they know they're also ticking the PAIA boxes as well.
Great. Yeah, that's something that Matthew mentioned there, is that on the website itself, on the SA Accounting Network website, I'm just going to have a / called PAIA, so you'll get the form there that you can submit if you want to get your PAIA manual done. And I think probably some of the questions and answers that we discussed, I'm going to put it on the website as well, if people want to go read through it in a bit more detail. And yeah, then we can help you guys to get PAIA compliant, or not PAIA compliant, but to get your PAIA manuals done. I think that's probably going to be step 1 of step 10, but the thing is we have to start somewhere. Matthew, I want to thank you once again for your time, or the time that you took to come and chat to me this morning, and I'm sure that a lot of small business owners are going to find huge value out of this video that we did this morning. And to all the viewers out there, remember to like the video as well and subscribe to my channel. And yeah, keep your eyes open for the next video that we're going to be doing, where I'm going to be talking to a PAIA specialist, somebody who specializes in all the policies and procedures and stuff to get your company compliant with the PAIA Act itself. Thank you, Matthew. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for you and your viewers, Heinrich. Appreciate you having me on.